Hello and welcome to Booklust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at University Bookstore is novelist Kevin O'Brien. Kevin, such a delight to have you here.
Nancy, it's just
a dream
thrill.
come
It's
true.
a dream come true. It is.
It's a thrill. You should.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, you write these intensely scary, creepy novels, and yet
Could you say that again, please?
Yes,
No.
I will. Kevin, you write these intensely scary, creepy novels that people love.
Yes. God.
Thank God,
Yes.
right. So, and yet you're such a nice guy.
I got you fooled, don't I?
You do, absolutely. I mean, if I had read your books first, I'm not sure you would be here today on the show. But since I met you and I know, how great you are.
You're so sweet.
Oh, Kevin.
God love
Say
you.
it again.
Oh, you are so sweet. Dang it.
So how did you get started as a writer?
Let's see. I went to Marquette University in Milwaukee, and I grew up loving Hitchcock movies. Just loved, like Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and then all the TV shows that were there. One Step Beyond, Thriller, Twilight Zone, and like I say, Hitchcock Presents. And I think I was a big fan of his because my oldest sister Adele, who's as tough as nails, scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. She's 15 years older than me. She was afraid to take a shower alone in the house. Somebody else had to be in the house, and I thought, why? And it's like, because of this movie Psycho. So I was dying to see Psycho. And I just became obsessed with Hitchcock and started writing short stories in grade school that were sort of like warped. One was called A Knack for the Neck. It was about a serial killer. I was in 6th grade. Talk about sicko. It was like, and I think that was like really my calling. I just started writing then, and then when I was at Marquette University in Milwaukee, I took a creative writing class on a lark, and the teacher was named Ann Powers, and she was really terrific. She was just very encouraging, and she, as a writing teacher, she was great because she didn't tell us what to write. She told us how to get your stuff sold, and which was something totally new to me. And she told us about the writer's market and how to write a query letter and things like that, which were so helpful. Instead of you've got to write something like Beowulf, and you're like, oh God, help me, Right. So I started writing some of my scary stories for her, and she pulled me aside and she said, you remind me of Robert Bloch, who I worked with in a writer's group. And I was like, you worked with Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho? And so, of course, I was like, it was a calling. So from then on, I kind of thought, I want to be a novelist. I want to write. I wasn't really tuned into thrillers right then. I loved thrillers, but I thought I'm just going to write a great epic novel. And my goal was to do it by the time I was 30. And if it didn't work out, I would, I'd
become a priest.
Exactly, like most normal psychotic writers would do.
With the last name of O'Brien.
That's right, with the O'Brien cut. Anyway. No, I made that goal for myself, and started writing when I moved to Seattle. I worked for the railroads. I was a railroad inspector. I got a job. Can you imagine me out in railroad yards with hard hat and steel-toed shoes, climbing on top of tank cars and making sure they were secured, full of hazardous materials and stuff like that. So that was me, and I was writing at the same time. And I took a class with Zola Helen Ross. I'm sure you know,
heard
yes,
of
the name. Lake Washington Voc Tech in Kirkland, and I started writing my first novel, which I called Actors. It was a sweeping saga. I ended up calling it The Thorn Birds Go to Hollywood. And I was working on that, got an agent for it, and I think it took us like 2 years to publish it. My 30th birthday came and went, and the day after my 30th birthday, at 6:30 in the morning, the phone rang, and I thought there was a railroad derailment. So and this is the days of your message machine would talk to you, and you'd be like, do I pick up, do I not pick up? And it was my agent saying, you sold the book to St. Martin's Press the day after my 30th birthday. So I held my goal.
Yeah.
So that's how aren't you sorry you asked? It's a long story.
Oh,
but
no,
that's
I
how
love
I got
that
to be
kind.
in it.
I think people are always interested in that, and I know I'm always interested in how that happened. And
Oh, the struggle, yes. Yeah. The lean years, you have to, you know,
Right.
yes.
But, so after that, after the Thorn birds go to Hollywood, but then you kind of switched to,
I automatically thought, of course, there will be jubilation in the streets. I've got a book coming out, everything else. I was stunned I wasn't on the cover of the Seattle Weekly. You know, I was like, why aren't people just flocking to me? In fact, I was at Nordstrom once, right after a book signing, and somebody came up to me and he's like, Kevin O'Brien, right? And I was like, why, yes. Would you like my autograph? And he's like, I'm Chip Morse. I went to school with you. I'm like, oh, get the hell out of here. I was like, I thought you were a fan, damn it. So it was kind of a wake-up call. And Terry Brooks, who I got to know through his wife, Judine.
Terry, the great fantasy writer.
The great fantasy
Yes.
writer, and such a great guy, too. What a
Yeah.
wonderful guy.
Yes.
He and his wife, Judine, and along with John Saul and Mike Sack, they took me under their wing, and they were really helpful. In fact, Judine set up my first autograph signing junket, and it was down in New Orleans. No, pardon me, it was in San Francisco. And it was 8 other authors, and we're all sitting at the banquet table, and I just was chewing the fat with the author by me, and I finally said, well, what do you write? And she said, well, the book I'm writing right now takes place on an S&M island. And I was like, oh, interesting. And she said, I wrote it under a different name. And I was like, and finally, after a while, we're talking, and people were just like flocking around her, and I said, well, what else do you do under your real name? And it was
Anne Rice.
You knew where I was going with this.
Well, because when I was managing a bookstore in Tulsa, that's when she wrote those books under like Crow Claire or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still remember one scene that involves cinnamon toast. For some reason, that's just stuck in my mind. You know, all these years. Yeah.
Cinnamon toast.
Roe Claire. That was how she.
Oh,
that
that's
was
it. That's it.
Roe Claire
Yes.
was her last
She was
name.
very nice.
So you've written a lot of books
Right.
now, and what I guess I want to know is how you keep them fresh. You know,
That's a great question. Yes.
You know, when you're writing, and do you have like a 2-book contract? I mean, or do you do one
Right.
at a time?
I just signed yesterday a 3-book contract. Yes.
Wow.
So I started out with 1 book, you know, and then it
Right.
went to 2, and then there was one single one, but it's all been with the same publisher, Kensington Books, and you know, to keep it fresh. Well, I should probably point out, the first book was this actor's book. The second one was called Only Son, and there was 10 years between the 2. In fact, I started to talk about Terry. He told me, he's like, don't quit your day job. I thought I could quit the railroads. I couldn't.
Right.
He said, don't quit your day job until you've made enough money for at least 2 years on your writing. And he said, so you can support yourself.
Right.
And so the second book, Only Son, actually really took off, thank God. It took about 10 years to publish, but it sold to the movies. It didn't get made, but for a while there, Tom Hanks was interested, and I got the option money, which was great. And it also sold to Reader's Digest all over the world. So I got enough money to live on for 2 years and was able to quit the railroads in 1997. Wow. So I've been writing full-time ever since. But Only Son was a tough sell, and my agent at the time said, you know, you should really write a thriller. You love Hitchcock. Here we come, circle around to Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And she said, you know, you just give it a shot and see what you think. So I wrote, my first thriller was called The Next to Die, and it was a USA Today bestseller. And it was so funny when we sold it. We sold it to Kensington, who had published Only Son. And we sold it for the same amount of money. And they said, this is not going to be a hardcover, this is going to be a paperback. And I was like, oh, I like, what a baby,
Yeah,
you know?
right.
I mean,
Well, you know, there's something, I think there's something, especially back then.
Yes.
You know, I mean,
Yeah,
there was
there was
something,
prestige in
there was
having a
prestige in
hardcover.
having a hardcover,
Right.
and then a year later having it come out in paperback.
Right.
And your books are in mass market
Right.
size, so, you know, that's another kind of thing. Falsely, I think we think, oh, that means they're lesser.
Right.
Do you know what
yes,
I mean?
It's true. I
Yeah,
agree. And
yeah.
you know what? I wouldn't want to go back to hardcover.
Right.
Doesn't that sound like, you know, sour grapes? But I probably
No.
wouldn't, because I really like being a mass market thriller. It's fun to see it in the
Yeah.
grocery stores and
Right.
everything else. And I think it's one reason why I made the bestseller list, is suddenly it was just mass. It's
was
true to the
there.
word, you know,
Right,
mass
right,
market, and it was
right.
suddenly out there. And so right away we found our niche. My agent said, yeah, I think this is what you should be doing. And pretty soon it was, the contracts would read Kevin O'Brien thrillers. And then the last contract I signed was 3 Kevin O'Brien serial killer thrillers. So that's like, I can't get out of this. There's not going to be any, you know, it's got to be specifically like this. But you nailed it. It's such a good question, how to keep it fresh. And that's the challenge for the last few books, because I've written 17. And, you know, after a while I'm like, oh, no, I killed somebody like that already.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Oh, I had that sort of set up in a different scene, you know, and 3 books ago. And, you know, people tend to like, it's like they sort of binge read my stuff sometimes if they just discover me.
Absolutely.
So that sounds so self-aggrandizing, but they...
No. I think that's so typical. I mean, that,
Yeah.
you know, you find an author and you love them, and then
Right.
you want to read everything that they've
Everything
written.
they do.
And of course they binge
Yeah.
read it.
So you always have to keep it fresh, because I find myself, you know, even using phrases like, you know, her face was swallowed up in the shadows. And I'm like, oh, I said that about 18 times in the last book. You
Right,
know, like,
right.
But you have these things that sort of creep you out that you want to use,
Yeah.
and you know, like you can't keep doing that. You have to keep it fresh, and that's the big challenge when you.
I
got one
remember,
book after another.
I remember once talking to David Robleski, who wrote a big novel, not a literary novel. And he had come from a computer background, and so what he did was write a program that could show him how many times he had used particular words, because you know,
Yes.
you become fond of a word or
Yes,
fond of a
a
phrase.
phrase or word, yes, or
Yeah.
just a gesture or an
Right.
action. You know, I think I find myself, you know, your own comfort stuff, and I'll have somewhere in every one of my books, I'll have a heroine making a grilled cheese sandwich. You know, because it's like
Oh,
I
that's
think
gr-
comfort.
oh,
You know,
yeah,
I'm like,
right.
yes, there's always something I fall back on that I'm like, oh, I better not do it this time. Let's at least skip a book. But one of my Amazon reviewers said something like, you know, I'm reading all his books in a row and they're starting to sound alike. And I was like, oh. So I'm killing that person in my next book.
Yeah, that's the good thing about thrillers. You can get rid of your
Oh,
enemies.
you do. I have to, okay. If somebody gives me a really lousy Amazon review, I'll look up their name and kill them. And I figure, you know, they tell me, I'm never going to read one of his books again. Well, good, I'll kill you in the
right.
next one. So, yeah.
So, do you keep track? I mean, now with, you know...
Of my books or the people who
oh,
don't?
right. Both.
Both, yes, I've got my hit list right there.
So, like, do you have like a spreadsheet that tells you like method of, or do you keep, you know, method of killing, or do you have it all in your head?
It's all in my head, you know,
Wow.
and it's the effort is to try and, you know, like you say, keep it fresh, do
Right.
something different.
Right.
And sometimes I will be sort of stuck in, you know, not sure where the plot is going. I outline everything first.
Oh, you do? I
Yes.
was gonna
In
ask
fact, I'm
you
working
that.
on an outline right now for my next
Wow.
book, for the 2016 book. And, you know, it was hitting a stale mark, and I popped in, love movies. So I popped in Silence of the Lambs. It was like 1:30 in the morning when I decided, okay, I need some inspiration, and to get creeped out and pass that along to my dear readers.
Yes.
And I was about a third into Silence of the Lambs when outside my apartment window I could hear, oh, I was like, OMG. It turned out to be some drunk guy that had fallen right below my window. But for a while there, it really gave me inspiration, let's put it that way.
Right.
It's always really so fun when like I say, I'm a night owl. And it's great when I'll stop and check my email, and if there's a fresh email at 3:30 in the morning from somebody in Nebraska saying, I'm reading your book right now, and I've just checked the locks again, and I hate you, and I can't put this book down. I'm like, yes, yes.
What's the appeal of those books, do you think, those type of books for readers? Like, you know, that that desire to be kind of scared and
Yeah.
creeped out. I mean, you had that
Right.
because you loved it even as a child.
Right.
And so what do you think that comes from?
You know, it's a really good question because, you know, Hitchcock used to say, you know, what's the first thing you do with a baby? Boom. You know, is to scare it a little, and then they get a little laugh, they get a little release. And I think that has something to do with it. But, you know, sometimes afterwards you're terrified, you know, for a long time. I mean, I used to sleep with a baseball bat by my bed when I was a kid because I'd be watching these scary things with the lights off. I'd scare myself intentionally. But I think people just kind of like the thrill, and yet there's a safety in knowing that you know, it's all fiction. And I think one of the good things about thriller writing, or one of the things I get out of it, and I think readers get out of it, is justice is served. And justice isn't always served in real life. And you get to see somebody brought down who's been pretty evil throughout the whole book.
And did you, at the beginning when you were starting writing these creepy, scary thrillers, did you think about having the same main character? I mean,
no, I actually like having these standalones, and I've been asked a few times, would you ever consider doing a series? And you know, I like having just your amateur detective, and if they're an amateur detective for 4 or 5 things, you begin to wonder why, you know, all these people in Miss Marple's town are dying off. Yeah, so you know, your school teacher once again has solved this murder mystery. So I like having somebody who's, you know, like a nurse. In my new thriller, she's a copy editor. So, you know, it's different.
Yeah.
I like bringing in different professions and somebody who has to rise to the occasion to solve a murder or a series of murders. I also like, you know, I like a good ending. And I think if you've got a series, you do have to sort of leave something open. And I remember one of my friends, Robert Degoni, wrote a thriller, and they asked about the next of the series, and he was like, sure, and they were like, and of course you're going to kill the wife, aren't you? And he was like, why? I liked her character. And, well, you can't have a main character who's married and happy. You know, so,
and that's what I was going to say. The other thing, I mean, I think that's an added problem of keeping it fresh, because you're locked into, and Bob Dugoni and I talked about this a little bit when he was on the show several years ago, but you're locked into decisions that you made in book 1 that you can't then, because then somebody is sure to write in and say, wait a minute,
wait a second,
you know, this person did not have a peg leg in book 1, and now all of a sudden they do.
I think there's something about thriller authors, or writers, or let's try thriller readers, who, you know, are just, they're used to solving mysteries and they want to remember everything. So it's like if they catch you making a mistake, they really want to let you have it.
Now, do you read other scary, creepy writers or not?
I don't get a chance to. You know, if it's too, when I'm in the middle of writing something, which is always, I rarely can sit down and read a whole book. I have to wait till I'm on vacation. So I have a stack of books, and if I really like a book, I can't read it because it keeps me up at night. And you know, I'm going to bed at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I don't want to be up reading this till 10 in the morning. So I wait till I'm on vacation, and it's usually, of course, one of my Seattle 7 friends that I'm reading, which, you know, or somebody I'm Facebook friends with or something like that. So.
But not particularly other thriller
Not
writers.
particularly other thrillers.
Because
no.
I'm thinking about Chelsea Kane from Oregon, who did a whole series of serial killer thrillers. But that's a great tongue twister.
It is.
Serial killer
Try
thrillers.
saying it. Yes.
And that were so scary that I remember someone saying to me that she could not, the other reader said she couldn't even go to sleep in the same room where the book was. And that's the feeling, I have with your books.
Oh, thank you.
I know the highest compliment that I could give.
No, I felt that way when I was a kid in 1966 looking at that jacket cover for In Cold Blood. Just that one spot of blood on it. I was like, scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And I think growing up during that time, because I grew up in Chicago in 1960, in the 60s, and there was like the Richard Speck murders and Charles Whitman down in Texas and Valerie Percy, who was in our neck of the woods, in North Shore suburbs. And I grew up like terrified the whole time. And yet, you know, for weird inspiration, I end up going back to these cases from Chicago from the 50s and the 60s, and I'll read up on them. I can't read current stuff. It's too, I think there's something about something being way back in the 50s and 60s that I'm comfortable reading about crimes and murders back then, but current stuff I can't read. But.
Now, tell me if this is too personal, and it's fine, and we'll go on to something else. But you know, it's from what I've gathered in the times that we've talked briefly before, that you came from a large, and your Facebook posts. That's another thing.
Oh, yeah.
A large, happy family.
Yes.
My question is, I mean, I think partly that you can write those books because you had that happy, secure childhood.
Isn't it funny? Because, you know, people sometimes wonder, they're like, was your father a real SOB or something? I was like, no, he was the sweetest guy in the world, and so was my mother. She was just wonderful. She was.
Because I think if you grew up in a terribly dysfunctional family where there was violence in some way, that those books, your books wouldn't be the same
Yeah, you
type
might end up
of book.
suppressing it or something like that. And I think this, you know, I didn't have any of that around me. You know, and in fact, my parents were incredibly supportive. When I told them I wanted to be a writer, they got me an electric typewriter and a big poster of a typewriter, and you know, they were just really great. And
now, your sister.
They cried when I got my first book published. They acted like I had had a baby and stuff, so they were thrilled.
Now, what about Adele, your older sister? Does she read your books?
She does. In fact, she's on my case to send her my next book, No One Needs to Know. She's like, when are you going to send me the galleys? And I'm like, as soon as I get it, Adele, take it easy. Yeah.
Now, I wonder if she has the same response about, you know, like not being able to take a shower, you know, unless there's somebody there to protect her to do that.
To this day, I think she must, because her husband's out of town. I shouldn't say that on the air. Her husband's out of town sometimes, so she has to take a shower by herself.
When your books, your middle books of the 17 or all have one-word titles.
Oh yes.
So
you've heard my routine, haven't you, about how he came up with all these?
No.
Oh, I didn't come up with any of my book titles. After Only Son was my book title, but for all the thrillers, it was my editor, and you know, they decide these things with the marketing team and everything else, and he started out with The Next to Die, and then it was Make Them Cry, Watch Them Die, and I was like, okay, am I going to have a cookbook, eat a pie, a dating book, meet a guy? You know, so they all rhymed for a while.
Lose a guy.
Yeah,
that would be good.
I like that one better. And then he started in on Final. So it was Final Breath, One Last Scream, The Last Victim, and then suddenly he went to the one words, and it was Kevin O'Brien, Vicious, and they put it there, so Vicious was between on my names, and so it was Kevin Vicious O'Brien, like I changed my name to Vicious instead of David for a middle name, and then it was Kevin O'Brien Disturbed, Kevin O'Brien Terrified, Kevin O'Brien, what was the last one? Unspeakable, which ironically enough was my first book on audio. Isn't that?
Oh, really?
Yes. And then suddenly he pulled a fast one, and it was Tell Me You're Sorry, and now the new one, No One Needs to Know, which I was just talking about with some of our booksellers here, saying, you know, it's a great response whenever anybody says, you know, what's your new book called? No one needs to know.
Right. So you've worked with the same editor for all these years?
Great. He is great. He knows what buttons to push with me, and he will give me suggestions about, you know, what to write. He's like, oh, you know, I was on the subway and I thought maybe you could do something with like Black Widow meets Stepfather. You know, it'll give me two movies that I've seen, and I can go, okay, let me mess around with that, and I'll start to come up with motivations and characters, and then I'll throw that back at him, and he's like, yes, I like this, let's go with this. And
so do you keep, are you I know that you outline everything, but do you keep notes then? I mean, on just about everything? I mean, do you listen to people talking on the street and say,
Oh, not that bad, but not that obsessed. But if I do get a good idea, I'll take notes. Yeah, definitely. And I have a little tape recorder.
Oh,
and,
oh.
yeah. So that's what I, especially right when I'm going to bed, at the crack of 7
Yes, right.
in the morning, I'll be like, get out the tape recorder and I'll say one last thought.
Now, do you think your books would be less scary and creepy if you wrote during the day?
Oh, what a great question. I like that. I kind of do as my deadline looms ahead.
Oh,
It's not just night. It's not just for night anymore. It's writing all day because the pressure of deadline. And so I think they're born. The outline is almost always done at night, and I think that's when I do get creepier ideas. So that's
Sort of natural, yeah, right.
Well, some psychiatrist was telling me that. He said, at like about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, your thought process is different than it is in the middle of the day. It's you can get a lot more moody. You could get a lot more, down just because of the time. You can become a lot more depressed or everything else. And so I guess I tap into that dark place. I have a funny story I should tell you about that. Is Jenny Shortridge, who I love and adore, she asked me if I would like to have my aura cleansed and my chakra read by a woman who does it for her. And I was like, no, I'm not interested. And she said, well, Kevin, it's free. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And so I went to the woman and she, did the waving of the hands. And she got to my feet and she said, there are cracks in your feet. You're letting somebody in to the cracks in your feet, and it's an evil little man. I said, really? And she said, he's helping you with something. He's working with something on you. And I said, did Jenny tell you I write thrillers? And she said, no. And I said, well, it's that evil little man that's at work overtime. So that's what, when people say, you seem like a nice guy. I don't know why you write these awful things. Like, it's that evil little man.
So we're out of time, but I just have one.
No.
Yeah, one so fast. I just have one quick question. If no one has read your books, which one would you want them to start with?
Ooh, that's a good one. A lot of people like my last one called Tell Me You're Sorry, but I love Unspeakable, which came out right before that because it's got the Seattle World's Fair in it, and it has show business and all this other fun stuff in it. But people seem to prefer Tell Me You're Sorry, so I'll put that one out.
Well, I'm going to say let's go with Kevin O'Brien's Unspeakable.
All right.
Kevin, it's been a delight. Thank you so
my
much.
dear. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.